Andrew Slimmon, he's the senior portfolio manager at Morgan Stanley Investment Management. I I mean, you
He was here.
He was here.
It was good. He was privy.
What's going on here.
He's
I'm
privy.
sorry that I completely
He's
lost.
laughing too.
I've lost the plot. But I think we're all trying to understand what's really happening in these markets. The markets are up on the back of this news that the president effectively says he's backing down. I'm sure he doesn't want to say he's really backing down. The question is, are we just all lemmings, like listening to you know, he's going to be tough, he's not going to be tough, tomorrow maybe he's going to have to be tough again. How do you see it?
I think the Wednesday, April 9th was an important day. Because on that day, Trump came out and said, I didn't like what I saw in the bond market. I didn't like Jamie Dimon saying there's a recession coming. And he said, so I'm putting a 90-day pause on. So in my opinion, what he really said is, tariffs are important to me, but a recession's worse. And so there's the priority, which he basically gave you the indication. There is a Trump put out there. I don't think it's down 10, 15, but it was when the market was almost down 20,
right.
Credit spreads started to quake.
Okay, so let me ask you a different question. As these quote-unquote negotiations over tariffs play out then, it seems to me if you are another country and you've now watched all of this play out, you say, when they come to you and say, well, by the way, we want to tariff you, you got to give us something. They look right back at you and say, give you something. Maybe you should give me something. Meaning, I don't know if you can get anything from these other countries for all of this. And so the question is, how can he, meaning the administration Trump, have a win in all of this when I imagine that these other countries are at this point going to try to embarrass him if they can?
Yeah, I mean, except...
And then how does that play out in the market?
Sure. So, look, as it pertains to market, and Joe, I think you've talked about this, the market started the year too expensive.
Yeah.
And 20% years, you're inevitably going to have kind of a pause year the third year. I don't think it's going to be a negative year because not enough money came into the market the last 2 years. But we started the year with way too much optimism. The average price target was 6,600, right? So now we've washed away a lot of that optimism.
Okay.
That's healthy. Right? But at the end of the day, the more the market goes up, I still think maybe we get to low 6,000s by year end. So we're going to have these, like, you know, these back and forth. And we got too oversold, too much optimism. I think it's healthy. Right, now the price target is 5,900 on the S&P.
Yeah, but Becky just interviewed a guest on the broadcast. I don't know if you saw, it's a small business that makes toys. And maybe not just a small business. Big issue. There's a lot of companies that aren't just, it's not just about whether they're overvalued or this or that. It's like a real thing. It's like a knife fight day in and day out just to survive.
And they're not going to be in line at the White House. You're absolutely right.
And I think that's the bigger issue. For small businesses, they don't get the exemptions. They don't get any of these things. We had Savita Subramanian on this morning. She said she wouldn't recommend buying the Russell 2000.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Now, if the president changes his mind and finds ways to maybe set a tariff at 10% or something along those lines to have these tariffs here to get some of these deals cut, would that change your mind on the Russell 2000?
Yes, but at the end of the day, for the stock market is driven by big companies.
But the economy is driven by small companies. They have 80% of the GDP growth. They have 80% of the jobs.
He doesn't want a recession.
Right.
He doesn't want a recession, so he will pivot if he sees bad signs. Now, the question is, will it be too late? But at the end of the day, for the stock market, I think the bigger issue is you have a group of stocks that make, you know, the Mag 7, and they're spending a lot of money this year, unlike past years. And they're saying, Andrew, don't worry, it's all going to work out fine. And so this is weighing on the stock market.
Okay, but the flip side is, so I was with Dan Loeb yesterday. We interviewed him and talked about that interview a little bit earlier. He's out of most of the Mag 7. I think he's still got a little bit of Amazon. Do you say to yourself, though, now, given where their stock price is, that now is a buying?
No.
No.
I don't think so, because what these companies are saying to you is, they're saying, Andrew, don't worry. All this spending is going to work out just fine. And the stock market is going, maybe, but we're not so sure until we see it. And so I think, you know, they make a big weighting in the S&P, so they're weighing on the stock market this year.
Okay, so then what works in this environment? Gold works, apparently, though it's retreating from record high right now.
Other parts of the S&P, the other 493, they aren't as expensive, right? And so I think it just all goes back to the S&P is probably not going to be the best place to be this year.
If you were playing either ETFs or, you know, there's a whole bunch of people who aren't buying individual stocks.
Yep.
and they're buying sector-specific stuff, or they're buying sort of broader things? What do they do?
I think the equal weighted will outperform the cap weighted. I think there's other sectors. I think financials will continue to do well this year. You know, I am very wary of earnings estimates right now because, you know, it kind of reminds me of COVID, right? Which is people were making guesses on what was going to happen. They really don't know. But I think there's other areas. I think other parts of the world. Right. I happen to think Chinese equities will do better than the U.S. this year.
Right.